Hi, my name is Hudson, and I am 21 years old, and I'm a senior at Texas A&M studying biology, and my minor is in psychology. And I'm from San Antonio, Texas, so it's not too far away from College Station. And today I'm going to talk to you about my interest in neuroscience and what I study in my lab where we research spinal cord injury. So when lots of people think of scientists, they think of like gray-haired old men with glasses and huddled over a test tube all day long. And sometimes that's true. But as a whole, research can be really exciting. And the reason it's exciting isn't so much that it gives you prestige or anything like that. That's good sometimes. But the best part about research is that you know it'll help someone. My lab studies specifically recovery function after spinal cord injury. Now, this means we study how someone can learn to walk again after they've had trauma to their spinal cord, which is a central bundle of nerves going down your back. That's what you feel in your spine. And that's where the brain sends all its signals out to the body, and where all your sensory input, what you feel, goes in, and your brain processes the information. So if that's damaged, it's very hard to do many normal things like walk and other functions. To study recovery function, it's important that we know the cellular processes that underlie recovery. So spinal plasticity, as I might have mentioned before, is just the way that neurons can adapt and change, and how they can learn to regrow and form new connections so that the damaged part can be healthy again, and thus that person can walk again. And it's really interesting to study the spinal cord because it's much more complex than one would think. We always associate learning with the brain, but learning can occur in many forms. For instance, the spinal cord can do lots of functions without even using the brain. So I burned myself yesterday, and it really hurt, and as soon as my finger touched the oven, I drew it away really fast. My brain had nothing to do with this. It was all a spinal reflex. So that meant the signal from my hand went all the way down to my spinal cord, and without even going back up to my brain, went straight to my muscle. It sent a signal out to my muscle so that I would take my hand away. And it didn't even hurt yet, but I knew it would hurt soon. So your spinal cord can do all these functions without your brain. We found even if you disconnect the spinal cord from the brain completely, you can have these responses. And these responses are subject to learning. So this isn't learning in the sense of, learning to read or write. It's a really simple form of learning. It's just learning to maintain a certain response to, say, avoid a stimulus, like avoid getting hurt or burned. So this has great implications for what the spinal cord can do by itself and how it can learn to form new connections. And in the case of recovery function, learn to regrow and learn to help that person walk again after injury. So the brain is really fascinating because each part has a special function. So all the things that go on are controlled by a different part of your brain. For instance, things that you don't think about, involuntary things like your heart beating and breathing and even just standing up and walking are controlled by what we call lower brain systems. So that would be where your brain stem is. And you don't have to think about those things. And the cerebellum, which is kind of in the back of your brain, controls balance and coordination. And that takes time to grow. Like a child might not have very good coordination, but over time, after practicing at grabbing things and practicing crawling or walking, that part of the brain actually grows and learns to make more complex movements. There are also in what we call the higher brain systems different areas that control emotions and control hunger, fear, all those things that are regular parts of our everyday lives. What's really interesting about this is that the higher functioning parts of the brain, the parts of the brain that allow us to think to the future, to dream, to make plans, to strategize, to solve problems, those parts of the brain are on the very outside surface in what we call the cortex. The cortex is really small compared to the rest of the brain. It's only a few millimeters thick. So it's incredible that all those higher functions go on in that small, tiny area. And that's what kind of distinguishes human brains from brains of other animals, is this very specialized cortex lining of the brain. If you want to maybe learn more about how the brain works, it's really always good to start with how the body works, because the brain is what controls the rest of your body. And that's how I got interested in it, just studying anatomy and physiology. And when you find out all the complex things that go on in your body, you have to wonder, what makes them all work? And eventually it comes back down to the nervous system in the brain. So maybe if you looked at that and learned more about that, it would help you study neuroscience. It's hard to keep going in research if you don't have a purpose. And that's why it's important for me personally to know that my research someday will apply to someone. I do spinal cord research, so people that get in spinal cord accidents, which is a huge number of people in America every year, I can research knowing that someday it'll help them. I can put faces to the research. So even when it's long hours in the lab and lots of work, I know that this could change someone's life someday. And so all those people who are stuck in wheelchairs just because of a freak accident, maybe there's hope for them somewhere along the line. And I can help with that hope and I can contribute to that. And that's a great feeling and a great reason to do research. So growing up, I wasn't always really interested in school. I always liked it okay, but there wasn't any one thing that really stood out to me until my mom went back to college. So having her in college, she had books laying around all the time. Lots of the books were dealing in biology because that's what she got her degree in. So she would always have biology books laying around, specifically anatomy and physiology books. And I loved them. I was a big nerd and I would always open the books and just look through them all day long. So I didn't always learn a whole lot of it. Like I probably don't remember things that I learned, but I just knew that I loved the way the body worked. And that interest stayed with me to college, and that's what made me decide to major in biology. I guess it's not the coolest thing when you're young to look through textbooks, but if you really open your mind to how incredible the body is, then I think you see how complex it is, and it deserves a lot of attention. Because that's who you are, that's how you work, and that's how you function. So the more you know about it, the more you can appreciate your life and appreciate all the ways that you get to live it and all the functions that you have that maybe you don't appreciate most of the time. Thanks so much for listening to everything that I had to say today, and I really hope that maybe something sparked your interest in neuroscience or in any field in the sciences.